He was always a big inspiration for me.
Only one person has done all that in one season, and he did it 4 different times.
That was it. That's the one thing I needed to hear.
I have a problem, a competitive problem.
Winning for most people turns off the desire for more winning.
Yeah.
But for me, just turns it on.
And he said, I never let my son win, ever.
He said it was the hand of God. It wasn't me.
Taking their money from his kid, from little kids.
Everybody in England, now they are looking at David Beckham as the enemy of the country.
Shaq came to a couple of our events.
He changed my life. He sold me the idea that I'm good enough to do a comeback.
Just understand you are queued up right now to create the story that someday people will be talking about you, about who the most inspirational person they ever met was.
She sold all her clothes to come to an event, and then she became $1 million earner.
Welcome to today's edition of The 4 Pillars, and today we're going to talk about inspiration. Because information is very important. You got to have information, but you also have to have inspiration. And I know growing up, there were certain people who inspired me. As a kid, there were athletes I admired and wanted to emulate. As the years went on, there's business people. Certainly, my mentor inspired me tremendously. But I just want to ask you, who is somebody who's inspired you, and what did it lead to in your life? George, who's someone who's an inspiration?
Someone that was inspiration since I was a kid was Michael Jordan. Because I was playing basketball, so I was admire him and inspired me for the way he was playing basketball. But over the years, and when I got into business and into leadership, then I kept having him as an inspiration for a different way of view. And the way he was accepted from his co-players as the leader of the team. Or the fact that he was always pushing himself to become better. I mean, from the simplest things, I mean, you would always see him wearing a dress when he was on the way to the game, when we would see Scottie Pippen, let's say, going to the game with not so formal dress.
Yeah.
I mean, the way he was acting from the simplest things to the way he was playing the game, he was always a big inspiration for me.
You know, I very much relate to that. I love Jordan. I love getting it. One day, if we really want to have a debate, let's talk about who's better, Michael or LeBron, because I don't know about here, but in America, wow, you could have a heated conversation about that
It's
one.
like Messi or Ronaldo.
Yeah, probably. And, you know, Jordan, to that point that you made, I remember him being, I'm rather fanatical about him myself as far as, you know, following him and everything. And, you know, he said he always dressed like that. He always wore a suit, always looked just put together all the time. And they asked him why. And he said, because, you know, I know I'm going to bump into people every day who are fans. And I know that they have a certain image of me in their mind of what they think I'm supposed to be like. And I want to live up to it. You know, like, what an amazing role model. Like, really, there's so many terrible role models in professional sports and in the movie industry and stuff. But for a guy like Jordan, like, he understood the weight of all the glory he was getting for playing a sport, and he really understood it and took it seriously.
And that was also one of his motivation and one reason to get better and better every time, because he said, people are coming and paid to see me.
Right.
And I always want them to see me at my best.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. You know, I think of in sports, you know, again, when we talk about Michael and LeBron, Michael obviously went off. You don't know Michael Jordan. I don't know what rock you've been underneath for the last 20 years, but he was, you know, considered by many, many people to be the greatest basketball player of all time. Played
Maybe
with the
the
Chicago
greatest
Bulls.
athlete.
Yeah, maybe the overall greatest athlete. And he won 6 championships with the Chicago Bulls. He won 3. He retired. He came back from retirement and then won 3 in a row again. Never lost in the finals. Won the MVP. I think there's only one person who was the scoring leader, first team all defense, won the championship finals, was the MVP of the regular season and the MVP of the finals. Only one person has done all that in one season, and he did it 4 different times. So, again, he's pretty remarkable. But they asked Mike Krzyzewski, who was a basketball coach at Duke University many years, one of the winningest coach of all time. And Krzyzewski was coaching the U.S. Olympic team when LeBron had just won his first championship. And they asked him, the question, who do you think? Do you think LeBron's as great as Michael? And he said, we'll see. Because, this always stuck with me. He said, most world-class athletes, people that win a gold medal, people that win the NBA championship, people that win the World Cup, they are driven in a way that other people just don't understand.
How many champions LeBron got? 5?
Let me just get to, at this point, he only had 1. Wow. So what the coach was saying, he goes, most people, and you could name many names who won 1 NBA championship, 1 World Series, 1 World Cup, 1 Olympic medal. But for people like Michael Phelps, or people like Michael Jordan, when they won, for most people, when they win, they had this burning desire their whole life. And when they win, he said it quenches that fire. It puts it out. It allows them to finally relax, because a lot of those people are driven out of, believe it or not, insecurity. They have to prove they're the best. And when they do, they finally relax. With Jordan and with Michael Phelps, it didn't put water on the fire. It put gas on the fire. It got even bigger.
I was reading an interview from Michael when they asked that question to him, what moved you? He said, winning for most people turns off the desire for more winning.
Yeah.
But for me, just turns it on.
Yeah.
And you know what makes him even bigger inspiration is the fact that even when he stopped being an athlete, he grew as an entrepreneur and a businessman, and he created so much success. I mean, he multiplied the worth of Nike right now.
He's a billionaire.
Because of him. I think he's the first billionaire athlete.
Yeah, first athlete to become a billionaire.
So imagine about the success he has after stop being the best athlete in the world. I mean, the driven he has and the hunger, it's...
They say his competitive nature. I remember watching a thing on 60 Minutes about, this is really just turning into a Michael Jordan. But that's okay. I'm actually okay with that, because they showed him at home, and like, he's just competitive, whether he's playing a game of cards or a game of checkers, playing with his kids. He was talking about playing his son, who at the time was maybe 10 years old, in one-on-one. And he said, I never let my son win, ever. Then years later, he used to do a basketball camp where really wealthy, I forget what it cost, it was $50,000, which at the time was so much money. And people like Mark Cuban used to go. And at the end of the camp, there's like 30 people a year to get to go. And he would play everybody one-on-one. And the thing is, not only would he not let them win, he said he wouldn't even let them make a shot. Just think about
if you watch that
Netflix
show. What's the name of the show?
The Last
Dance. What impressed me is that he said at every game I was finding one reason why this game is special, and I need to win this game. And sometimes he said I couldn't find a reason, so I was going to the opponents. And I was telling them, do you think you're going to win this game? Do you think you're better? So I was pushing them to tell me something to get me upset and make me mad, so I can be aggressive and go against them.
The other thing he said, I said examples. If it inspires you, great. If not, follow somebody else.
It's true though. He used to get angry and get worked up, and then he would just go out and demolish people. Tom Brady just said that. He was with Patrick Bet-David at an event, and he asked him some questions, and Brady goes, I didn't like anyone. If you were my competitor, I wanted to I didn't like you at all. I didn't even try to like you. I didn't want to like you. I used to find things in my head to be angry at you about, so I could go. And I know there's people watching this. We talked about the colors in the past. Blue ring. The yellows are going, but that's so wrong. Why do you have to get angry at someone? But it's just a great example of understanding how you can take something negative and turn it into something positive.
Even recently, like I mentioned earlier today when we were having breakfast, I saw a documentary with Shaq, where he was saying like they were in the finals and nobody had really been saying anything until he heard one interview that Mutombo had where he said, "Oh yeah, Shaq's not going to be MVP this year," and he's like, "That was it. That's the one thing I needed to hear."
Yeah.
And they were going down.
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
I just took my notes out from the last dance, and there are so many things. I mean, here he says, "I have a problem, a competitive problem."
Yeah. No, there's no doubt. And to your point with Shaq, I remember like it's so interesting to me. And we met Shaq. So Shaq came to a couple of our events. First of all, he's such a nice guy. Funny guy, like witty beyond belief, and just really chill like out. So you got to go out of your way to piss him off. But when you do piss him off, he's obviously going to use that in the same way that Michael Jordan used it, same way Tom Brady used it, is fuel to make them much better at what they're doing.
And the other thing that is funny is like, in being in the, obviously doing the events with Shaq, backstage before he came on, he was back there with his kids. And he's like, "Hey, how much longer till we go on stage?" And they're like, "Oh, you got 20 minutes." He's like, "Okay, come on, pull them out." So they each took out, he's like, "I'll pay, or let's play for $20 each." And they were doing the whole flipping the bottle.
Yeah, where you try to make it.
And as soon as the kids would lose, he would take their money. He's like, "Oh, we lost." So he was being and to me, I was like, that's so crazy that he's taking their money from little kids, without hesitating at all.
Yeah, but if that's one of the things I really admire about him is the way he raises children. He said something when we were on stage. We were doing a Q&A. And I asked him a question about something about how do you raise your children so they're not entitled or something like that. And one of my favorite lines of all time, he says, "I tell them all the time, we're not rich. I'm rich." So for all the parents who have a little bit of money, remember that line. That's a great line. But he doesn't get, what he does give them is all the money they need to get not only a college degree, but also a master's or a doctorate.
The other thing that recently came out is that he had his son came to him and said, "Hey, Dad, I want to be a farmer."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, why?" And he's like, "I'll help you, but write me a business plan. And also why." So he said, "I want to help, parts of the city that aren't exposed to farms or, have little resources and everything." He's like, the business plan made sense, so I helped him. I funded it, So again,
and he said he won't. So he'll pay for their education, and if they want to start a business, he won't do it unless they have a degree, and then they have to submit a business plan that not just he, but his advisors approve. So he is giving it if they earn it, which to me is such a powerful thing, man. So Shaq inspires us. Michael Jordan inspires us. Who else inspires us?
I liked
it comes
somebody from as a kid. I liked Maradona.
Maradona,
but only because he was so wild, spontaneous.
The truth is, all these people, especially people in sports, they get individual rewards for teamwork. Right. Including Michael Jordan, including Maradona, including Shaq. It's a teamwork, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at sports, somebody that inspires me a lot, which I'm not. If you are not watching football, if you are not watching soccer, probably you don't know him. But it's Sir Alex Ferguson. I was reading his biography 2 months ago. Sir Alex Ferguson was the coach of Manchester United.
Right. Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
So
I've read about him.
I think he's the two. There are either 2 or 3 individuals in sports that United Kingdom nominated them to become sirs.
Oh wow!
Which is a big thing.
Him and Lewis Hamilton, I think.
And Bobby Charlton. Yeah. So, long story short, I was reading his biography, and he was saying how good he's at sales. So how good he is at sales.
Yeah.
And he never sold any specific product.
Yeah.
He never sold any service.
Yeah.
He was always selling his ideas.
Yeah.
So it was an incident in football back in the 90s with David Beckham. Okay. I guess you know David Beckham. Course. He played also in MLS in the United States. So David Beckham was the new talent of United Kingdom. And you remember what happened in 1986 with Argentina and England? You heard the story when Maradona scored a goal with his hand.
Oh.
So he scored a goal with his hand. Argentina won the cup. And then they asked him, hey, they told him that wasn't fair.
That's illegal,
you scored
right?
with a hand. He said it was the hand of God. It wasn't me. That was Maradona, right? Yeah. And that created so big hatred between Argentina and England. 10 years later, England was playing against Argentina for the World Cup.
Wow.
And David Beckham was the talent
star
of England. And around the 15th minute of the game, David Beckham got upset with a player from Argentina. He kicked him without any reason and he got a red card.
Oh, right.
So he got a red card and he got out of the game. Right. England lost the game.
Wow.
And the whole UK nation, everybody in England, now they are looking at David Beckham as the enemy of the country.
Right. Wow.
You know, football in England is like, and in Argentina, it's like religion. It's like a huge thing.
Yep.
So now everyone is looking at David Beckham as the enemy of the country.
The traitor.
Wow.
The traitor, they want him to get out of the country. He didn't go to England after that game. He went to United States because he was afraid to go back home.
I never knew that.
Crazy story.
You consider documentary.
So then he goes to England and there are thousands of people outside the airport telling him, you should go back to United States. We're going to kill your family. We're going to kill you. Jeez. They were threatening his family. It was a huge story, and it was everywhere in the news. And here is what happens. David Beckham goes to the trainings. Sir Alex Ferguson is there. And David Beckham says, he changed my life. He sold me the idea that I'm good enough to do a comeback. Yeah. So he was ready to commit, David Beckham was ready to commit suicide. He was out of his mind. And then Sir Alex Ferguson took him and he said, come back, I will bring you back in place, I will recreate you. And I'm sharing this story because David Beckham wasn't the only one who said, Sir Alex Ferguson changed my life. Yeah. Eric Cantona, and if you are not watching football, probably you don't know those names, but there are so many good players, amazing, crazy rock stars, good football players that they worked only with Sir Alex Ferguson. Yeah. And he said two things. Number one, I don't see myself as a coach. I see myself as a salesman because I could sell to those players my ideas. Right. And then he said, if you see yourself as a salesman, the first rule you should remember, if you cannot put a smile in your face, you should not open a shop, which means people will buy from you ideas because they like you or because they want to be like you. Right. Wow. So that person inspired so many people, so many football players to play at the best level, which for me, that's a story that not everybody's going to share, but sports is not a team. It's not an individual work. It's a teamwork.
Yeah. Well, we're going, so, I have many players inspired me. For sure, Michael Jordan. For sure, Tiger Woods. And again, the reason why they inspired me was their commitment to excellence. I remember reading at Tiger's height of his, he was making a fortune, one of the most famous people in the world, and he was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and working out and then eating a very strict breakfast and then going and working on his golf swing and then having a very strict lunch and then going in like all day, every day. Was like a machine committed to being the best. That's what inspired me. Not necessarily his actual play on the golf course, but how that's where I could relate to, wow, man, this guy is that committed to being great. But as the years have gone on, like you're saying about Alex Ferguson, I've become more inspired by coaches. My favorite person by far now is Nick Saban, who coaches Alabama. Because to me, the player is doing it, and there's something to that, obviously, but the coach doesn't ever get on the field. No. Think about that. So no matter how great you are, you have to inspire other people.
Exactly.
And they're saying, I listen to sports radio all the time, and they were going, man, like they're talking about, coaches getting hired and fired in the NFL, American football, and teams are looking for the guy who's the best offensive mind or the best defensive mind or the person who understands analytics the best. And he goes, they're missing the point. They forgot the number one rule. Are they a great leader of men?
Yeah,
exactly. And the first example, I grew up as a kid, and all I heard was Vince Lombardi, the Green Bay Packers. And Green Bay, this is back when you couldn't watch every game every Sunday. I mean, to watch a Packer game was rare. But I became this raving fan of this guy, Vince Lombardi. And then when I got in sales, ironically, they showed all these clips of him teaching what he would teach the Green Bay Packers to make you a better salesperson. Yeah. And his whole goal was to make them better men, to make them better men in their community, to make them better husbands, to make them better fathers. And by molding them, they loved him so much they didn't want to let him down on the football field, which is very similar to what happens at Alabama. And I mean, again, this is what's so great. Everyone's like, he's the greatest coach. He's the greatest coach. He's the greatest coach. But what he's done is he put over 100 of his players in the NFL. And I think collectively they've earned $3 or $4 billion. So think about that. Like, he's only getting his success. It's Zig Ziglar's thing. If you help enough other people get what they want, you'll automatically get what you want. So, yeah, I don't know. We got on a sports rampage.
Yeah.
Now, here's an odd question is, do you think
Tell us.
The Bulls would have had as many championships without Phil Jackson?
Yes, with Michael, as long as they had Michael. I think Phil Jackson was a big part of it.
Do you
He
think
was
they
good
would
on
have...
controlling the characters.
He was very important.
Do you think they would have with 5 Michael Jordans in the team? Which means without any Dennis Rodman, without any Scottie Pippen.
There had only been one Michael Jordan.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. If they had 5 Michael Jordans, you cannot win a game with 11.
Here's the thing. I think they would have won championships without Phil Jackson. I don't think they would have won as many. He was, again, talk about understanding. One of the I've read his books too. He said, I never treated players the same. I treated them with the same mutual respect. He goes, but you're not going to treat Michael Jordan and a guy, Judd Bushler, the last guy on the bench. You're not going to treat him. I mean, Dennis Rodman, to be able to coach him. No, because people don't remember, Dennis Rodman had been, the Spurs just let him go. They gave up on him. And he was still an amazingly talented player. And they had a really great coach too.
Like
Dennis Rodman.
But they couldn't get him to perform. So
Phil
Jackson had a lot to do with it.
Dennis Rodman said that I was drunk in Las Vegas before a match, and Phil Jackson was the reason that I went back to play the game.
Oh, that was in the last dance.
The last dance.
it was in the last dance. Yeah.
He was fully respected from all his players, and he was the reason that all of those great players came together.
Yeah, to me, the ones that they inspire me are the ones that they play the orchestra. The maestros.
Yeah. Well, also remember, as I said, Phil Jackson, maybe they would have won without him. Remember, he left the Bulls and went to the Lakers, and then Shaq and Kobe, who had a hard time getting along, to say the least, won 3 championships out there, or 2 championships with him. 2 or 3, I forget. So, yeah, he was a pretty good coach.
Phil Jackson, there you go.
He's a good coach. Look at that, Monaco, jumping right in there. So Maradona, Phil Jackson, we got it all going on.
Which one is your favorite sport?
My favorite sport actually is boxing. So
is it?
Yeah, which goes
so
against
let's talk about Mayweather.
Or back to Rocky.
To me, I personally
Manny
believe
Pacquiao.
No, I actually believe Julio Cesar Chavez is the best one. Even above Mayweather, even above
Not the New Mexican guy?
No,
Canelo?
No, he's no.
Not Muhammad Ali.
Canelo. He's not a new, but he's fighting right now.
Yeah. But that's, it goes against team sports where you were saying, it's not one individual.
Yeah.
But it's still a team behind them.
Well,
right?
they're still, I guess.
You're dependent. They're both great, because if you look at a golfer like Tiger or Roger Federer or any of the Nadal or Djokovic, they are by themselves. Right. You know what I mean? So in a lot of ways, when you're trying to be an entrepreneur and be successful, you are by yourself. Right. When we did our podcast with Michael Sloggart, who's the owner of a company, he said, man, I'm lonely a lot of the time. Like I have no one to complain to. There's no one above me to complain to. So being an individual is tough, but then go to everything we've been talking about. Michael Jordan would have never won until he involved his teammates, until he trusted his teammates. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And same thing with, every team sport. At Tom Brady, they were 1 year, they were close to being undefeated. They were almost the second team in the history of the NFL to be undefeated. They went through the regular season undefeated. They got to the Super Bowl, but they lost that game mainly because the offensive line couldn't stop the other team from knocking Tom Brady on his butt over and over. So even if you're that great, if your team doesn't block for you, or if you throw a perfect pass right in a guy's hands and he drops it. So there's a lot we can learn from team sports and individual sports. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you are in a team, part of a team, and you are not on your peak, you can hide behind others. But when you are an individual, you cannot hide. You have to perform on your peak all the time.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Well, this was a good one. I don't know how we we've been inspired by people in sports, and I guess that's it. Let me ask this last question before we wrap. Are there any people outside of the sports arena who have inspired you?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, Steve Jobs is my number one inspiration when it comes in business. Elon Musk today, I can talk about Steve and Elon for hours.
Yeah.
There are so many stories of people that succeeded in the business.
Yeah, I think some of the people that we've had in our companies have inspired me tremendously. I mean, incredible stories of coming from nothing and just giving everything they have.
Or the KFC story. I mean, the guy started on 65.
I mean, besides
then
the
you
KFC
have other people
story,
at 65 say
we have another story, a lady selling chickens.
That's true.
A lady selling chickens in her island of 100,000 people, 70,000 people. Then she sold all her clothes to come to an event, and then she became $1 million earner.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. Like that to me, Vattiari is one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard. Yeah. So let's wrap with this. Vattiari's story is so inspiring. Colonel Sanders' story is so inspiring. Stephen Jobs getting fired from his own company and then creating the #1 brand is so inspiring because of the hard time they went through. Right. So if you're going through a really hard time right now, instead of being a victim and feeling sorry for yourself and asking yourself why this happened and it's not fair, just understand you are queued up right now to create the story that someday people will be talking about you, about who the most inspirational person they ever met was. So that's our last thoughts for today here on the 4 Pillars, but we look forward to seeing you next week, and don't forget to get registered for A View from the Edge.